on Tuesday, there was a story about how Matt Gaetz, Republican congressman, he's in the House, Florida representative to the U.S. House of Representatives. There was a story going around early Tuesday where Matt Gaetz was thinking about calling it a day and leaving his seat and hanging up his political boots. And he was shopping around to different right wing media organizations, Newsmax, Fox News, maybe One American News as well. Um, Basically looking for a nice, plush little right wing media gig. And that's, not out of the ordinary for right wing politicians to get on these programs after their career, but is sort of odd for a young Congress member to look to get out of their role as an elected official to do that. If he had lost an election or, lost his seat or carried out a term and decided not to run for reelection, that'd be one thing. But that wasn't the case here. So I think some people were questioning what's going on here. I know I saw that and I was like, "Ooh, something about to drop or what's this is weird." Lo and behold, just a few hours later, something did drop. And apparently, the US Department of Justice has been investigating Matt Gaetz over an improper relationship, allegedly, with a 17-year-old woman. I mean, 17-year-old, so technically, really a girl. And they were looking into how he was spending money, apparently paying for her accommodations and her airfare, flying her around, and just a bizarre story. And there's further. The story goes even further because the reason the Department of Justice even found out about this was because they were researching an even more bizarre case involving an associate of Matt Gaetz, and I will likely get into that on another date. We'll do a full bore breakdown of that. I'll probably have a guest on to talk about that. But the Matt Gaetz thing by itself is weird. And there was already this whole weird separate side story that I'm not wondering how separate it is about his adopted now adult son, Nestor, a young immigrant who he apparently adopted as an adult, who lives with him. He calls him his son, but we're talking like a man here. Just a bizarre, weird thing. Very, very weird. But and this whole thing added to that. And I should say, by the way, that this investigation began under the Trump administration. Bill Barr, who was Trump's attorney general, Bill Barr is the one. It was his Department of Justice that opened up this investigation into Matt Gaetz's alleged relationship with this young lady. So something weird's going on here. Something bizarre is going on here. Well, obviously, you find out a bunch more. Matt Gaetz is trying to set the story straight by saying there's some sort of conspiracy against him and how he was being blackmailed, and this is not true, not accurate, not real. His father was brought into this, and his father was forced to wear a wire. Just a really out there story. But it gets even weirder. And this weird section of the story was luckily caught on videotape. So, unlike everything I just talked to you about, which was all, written reporting and, Gaetz putting out statements on Twitter, etc., this is something that literally played out in front of all of us on live television that same night on Fox News when Matt Gaetz went on the Tucker Carlson show Tucker obviously reached out to him to set the story straight. Gaetz probably thought this was a great opportunity to do that, to defend himself. Tucker probably thought this was going to be a great way to help out one of his favorite Republicans, I'm sure, being how Trumpian Gaetz is, and help him set the record straight. Let me give you a little hint before we dive in. It did not go the way I think Matt Gaetz hoped it went. It did not go the way I think Tucker Carlson expected it to go. Let's dive right in and hit up this first clip that I pulled. Sort of kicks off. It gets right into it, but it's sort of at the very beginning, kicks off the interview with Matt Gaetz really trying hard to give his side of the story.
Congressman, thanks so much for coming on. Appreciate it. So this is obviously a serious allegation. Tell us what the truth is from your perspective.
It is a horrible allegation, and it is a lie. The New York Times is running a story that I have traveled with a 17-year-old woman, and that is verifiably false. People can look at my travel records and see that that is not the case. What is happening is an extortion of me and my family involving a former Department of Justice official. On March 16th, my father got a text message demanding a meeting wherein a person demanded $25 million in exchange for making horrible sex trafficking allegations against me go away. Our family was so troubled by that, we went to the local FBI. And the FBI and the Department of Justice were so concerned about this attempted extortion of a member of Congress that they asked my dad to wear a wire, which he did with the former Department of Justice official. Tonight, I am demanding that the Department of Justice and the FBI release the audio recordings that were made under their supervision and at their direction, which will prove my innocence and that will show that these allegations aren't true. They're merely intended to try to bleed my family out of money.
Very carefully worded, if you'll notice. And also, never really gets into why his dad's wearing a wire. Who is his dad? Who did the FBI want to get on tape? Using Matt Gaetz's dad. Just really, I think that actually ends up giving more questions than answers. I mean, he sort of dives into a whole nother story, which I'm sure will be scrutinized and looked at. And I'm sure Tucker is sitting there with his classic confused look. But I'm actually going to say that this is one of those times where Tucker's confused face actually fits what Tucker's thinking. The guy's probably legitimately confused right now. And things get even weirder. Because Matt Gaetz then goes ahead to discuss his story by trying to compare it to something Tucker Carlson went through, which I'm sure Tucker Carlson did not want to have brought up.
And I believe we are in an era of our politics now, Tucker, where people are smeared to try to take them out of the conversation. I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. You were accused of...
Could you imagine inviting this guy on your show, throwing him a bone? You want him to be able to tell his side of the story, get this straight. You don't want your buddy, this guy you like, to go down this way. And he goes on there and he basically says, "Hey, Tucker, remember that time you were allegedly accused? You were accused of allegedly sexual improperness Let's continue that clip and just rewind for a second. That's just too
Take them
much.
out of the conversation. I'm not the only person on screen right now who's been falsely accused of a terrible sex act. You were accused of something that you did not do, and so you know what this feels like. You know the pain it can bring to your family, and you know how it just puts people on defense when you're accused of something so salacious and awful. But it did not happen. It is not true. And the fact that it is the basis of this attempt to extort my family tells a lot. And if the FBI and Department of Justice will release the tapes that they are in possession of, the American people will see what is really going on.
You just referred to a mentally ill viewer who accused me of a sex crime 20 years ago. And of course, it was not true. I'd never met the person. But I do agree with you that being accused falsely is one of the worst things that can happen. And you do see it a lot. Let's go back to the investigation.
Oh, yeah, Tucker, no way Tucker Carlson is happy that Matt Gaetz brought that up. I mean, imagine doing that. Imagine. And as gutsy as that was for Matt Gaetz to do, it's not even the craziest thing that happens in this interview. By far, the most insane, out of this world thing that happens in this interview is this. So Matt Gaetz is telling Tucker Carlson more about this story and the woman involved, and he brings up a dinner that he had with Tucker Carlson, and he attempts to implicate Tucker Carlson into this whole ordeal. Matt Gaetz tries to basically use Tucker Carlson as an alibi and forces it upon Tucker on the spot on his live Fox News television show. Let us play this absolutely bonkers clip.
Again, I only know what I've read in the New York Times. I can say that actually you and I went to dinner about 2 years ago. Your wife was there, and I brought a friend of mine. You'll remember her. And she was actually threatened by the FBI, told that if she wouldn't cop to the fact that somehow I was involved in some pay-for-play scheme, that she could face trouble. And so I do believe that there are people at the Department of Justice who are trying to smear me, providing for flights and hotel rooms for people that you're dating who are of legal age is not a crime. And I'm just troubled that the lack of any sort of legitimate investigation into me would then convert into this extortion attempt.
I don't remember the woman you're speaking of or the context at all, honestly. But
Let me explain what just happened at the very end of that clip there. Tucker Carlson basically said, "What the hell, man? I'm not getting involved in this. Don't you do that to me. I'm going to deny having any recollection of what you just described." Also, I want to point out Matt Gaetz's very, very, very careful wording there, where he says there's nothing improper about providing hotel accommodations for someone of legal age. Now, legal age where? Specifically, what age are you talking about? What's the legal age we're describing here, Matt Gaetz? I feel like you're leaving something out. And the interview concluded, and if you thought that was everything, you'd be wrong. Because, listen, if there's one thing you definitely do after having a member of Congress on your show to set the record straight after being implicated in a scandal, the one thing you do is have for sure, when everything goes well, is have a post-interview moment where you talk to camera and basically add some additional commentary to that interview that just happened. And you definitely say this.
If you just saw our Matt Gaetz interview, that was one of the weirdest interviews I've ever conducted. That story just appeared in the news a couple of hours ago. And on the certainty that there's always more than you read in the newspaper, we immediately called Matt Gaetz and asked him to come on and tell us more, which, as you saw, he did. I don't think that clarified much, but it certainly showed this is a deeply interesting story, and we'll be following it.
Oh,
Don't quite understand it.
I don't quite understand it either, buddy. I concur. I don't think you'll ever really hear me say this, but I will say it today. I agree with Tucker Carlson. That is certainly one of the weirdest interviews I have ever seen.